Welcome, everyone. My name is Razwan. I am from Mannai Data Centers. I head the business here in Qatar. With Today, we will be talking about Thousand Eyes and purely focused on the core banking system. In our previous webinars, we have delivered a generic Thousand Eyes demo, which you can find on our YouTube channel. Today we'll be more focused on how Thousand Eyes is helping the financial organizations drive better customer experience and the better application visibility. So with me today, I have Martin Wheeler from Thousand Eyes and Anthony Finn from Thousand Eyes. So I'm going to hand over to Martin and Anthony to take this forward.
Thank you, Razwan, and thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Anthony Finn. I am the Regional Director for Thousand Eyes here in Europe, Middle East and Africa. I have about 15 or so slides which I'm going to share with all of you. And as Razwan said, the primary focus today is around digital business experience and in particularly financial services. So I'm just going to open the share screen and quickly grab my slides. So you should start to see those slides now. Let me just put them on full screen so it's a better experience. So digital business assurance is something perhaps you've heard of. It could also be something maybe new to yourselves, but in our new world of digital economy and where so much is transacting across the internet, and when I say so much, we're talking $3 to $5 trillion a day. Much of the weight of that is being carried by the banking and financial services system, but needless to say, it's expanding and exploded out into all industries. So the big problem that everyone's facing is this lack of visibility of control, especially in this new order of things when so much of these transactions or so many of these transactions are happening outside of the typical framework of IT. And when it shows up on both sides of operations, right? You have the actual operational side, what's going on, why is it happening? And on the outside of the business, inside the business, people are experiencing things, whether it's a customer or an employee, it's all causing stress and it's creating a negative impact for that company. It's not going away as a problem. And this is the reason, I guess, for today's call is the problem is actually going to continue to get bigger. So today it's 5 to or so trillion a day. By 2030, it's expected that somewhere between 3 and 5 trillion devices could be transacting with one another when you look at virtualization. In the worst case or best case, it's going to be 3 billion devices will be transacting one another. And that's happening in the entire framework of this new digital economy. So how does that show up in the financial services climate and what's happening in the market? The big challenges are things like war for talent. I love that description because it is absolutely a war for talent. In fact, recently when I was in the region in Dubai, we were sitting in a room of 14 CIOs, and when we were asking what was the single biggest thing that was challenging them in terms of transformation and tech investment, one of those big problems, or the biggest, was talent. How do they get the right people to do the jobs that need doing? The second big show up here is that this migration from traditional compute into the cloud comes with its own sets of problems, but many companies know that they need to do it, or certainly have a plan to do that. And then, of course, the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, in the banking world, as we move more and more toward mobile device as a tool for transactions, it already is, but it's going to become the center point of all transactions. The market opportunity is huge in financial services. The outlook, of course, is then if you have this situation where you're moving more of the core to the cloud, you have this potential risk for human connection loss. So, we're already seeing it a lot, both in financial services, but even more generically, especially in service provider, where you're working with an avatar of some kind, so an AI bot in the first instance of all communication with the company. As we know, sustainability and green initiatives are becoming bigger. I mean, it's not invisible to anyone that right now there is a huge heat wave, potential evidence of global warming in the region of Europe, hotter than it's ever been in history. And so there's a lot more pressure on industry and in particular the world of compute to find more sustainable green initiatives that help them with how they show up in their environmental and social responsibility. The main thing that most are doing to do that is modernizing operations, looking at digital transformation, automation, and kind of shifting into the cloud. Of course, at the heart of all of that, for everyone, is the fact that security is going to become more and more complicated. And you'll see just now, when I show you a slide of this distributed environment, just how impactful this can be. So this new digital business economy is going to be so big, so prevalent, so important. One of the things that's really important for the financial services industry is to look at 3 or 4 major levers. One is, how do they make sure that the customer and employee experience is the best that it can be? How do they ensure that the workforce, in order to be competitive for this talent problem that's out there, how do they make sure the workforce can work from anywhere? Of course, making sure that when the workforce is showing up for work, wherever they are, everything that they're doing is, of course, secure. And then importantly, if they're moving infrastructure and adopting more cloud services and internet services, that the problems that may show up, and there will be problems, will be able to be resolved. So if you're in a financial services organization, it's really important to be looking at this thing through 3 lenses. One, how does your customer experience its interactions with you as a company? How much do you force that customer to use applications? In fact, in Germany right now, there is an environment where Deutsche Börse are looking at some form of governance to institutionalize, where if a bank forces a customer to use an app, they have to give that customer some ability to have at least 5 nines of service or above. It's not good enough to say, here's the app, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, and good luck with the experience. And if you can't do a transaction that's urgent, I'm sorry, that's just not going to be good enough. Of course, in the workplace, as we all compete for talent, there is a bigger expectation, certainly with the next generations of employee, to want to be able to work flexibly. That doesn't mean they won't show up in an office, and it doesn't mean that offices aren't still going to be important. It just means that that ability for them to work flexibly is going to be important. And then I think as we see this explosion into digital and all the variances of opportunity to exploit new applications, do transformation of old applications, migrate to the cloud and find efficiencies there, use alternative networks, if that's a transformation of your own old legacy MPLS networks, or for that matter, just going completely cloud native, it's being able to ensure that those 3 lenses are properly covered as an organization. So it goes without saying that we're in a completely new world. Your apps are distributed, your people are distributed, and your infrastructure is distributed. And the challenge with that is, whilst it's wonderful when you think about it in paper terms, the reality is in a network operations or even a security operations standpoint, it can be quite a nightmare. So I'm going to pause here for a second just to share, why did I end up at Thousand Eyes? About 3.5 years ago, it was the 5th time that we'd taken a very, very large insurance company's frontline desk down, or at least that's what we were accused of. So they had hundreds of agents who couldn't transact orders for insurance policies and so on and so forth. As I said, it was the 5th time, probably in about 6 months. And at that point, the CEO of that company phoned the CEO of our company and said, and I was with a large telco, if you find me on LinkedIn, you'll see which one it is. This has to stop, and we're going to apply the full structure of the service credits for our SLA agreement. That's when I started looking for a way to find out who was the problem, as opposed to always being blamed for the problem. Because we would sit on these large P1 calls, and during those calls, everybody was blaming everyone, and nobody was expecting to accept responsibility. And the consequence of that is that they took lots and lots of time to find recovery. Wow. So if we hypothesize then that the data center is now all cloud-based, or will certainly be, the app stack that was traditionally inside our castle and moat on our own compute environment is through third-party SaaS providers, or possibly also APIs. The branch of one, in other words, an employee working from anywhere, is the new office, and the internet is the new network. You can imagine how that complexity showed up for us as an organization that was doing managed services for this large insurance company. And it's the reason I ended up with Thousand Eyes, and finding that it brought incredible visibility to all 4 of these environments, which are traditionally blindsiding companies. So how does Thousand Eyes operate? It's very simply 3 distinct environments. So we provide these lightweight software agents that can reside almost anywhere. So I'm going to say almost because there are some exceptions, but without necessarily going into those here. So you have 3 points of visibility. You have an opportunity to look from the outside in. In other words, we have these cloud agents, the ones you see in green here on the screen. They're deployed across about 300 cities globally, in thousands of locations across all sorts of different environments. That might be network providers, cloud providers, infrastructure providers, and so on and so forth. What that means is you're able to provide synthetic simulations of tests of traffic, any kind of traffic, from those locations to any destination. When you look at the second framework in which we operate, which is inside out and inside in, they're the orange ones or the amber ones. What those agents are doing is pretty much exactly the same thing. So they're lightweight virtualized agents. They can sit on most infrastructure, most networks, typically are embedded in routers, switches, and so on and so forth. And those allow you to look inside your own environment. So if you're a large global financial institution or bank, and you've got lots of network complexity, which includes, the mix of networks, this particular environment is very good for being able to see inside your own business and that complexity, and also if it breaks out into the public internet or third party, it allows you to see that transparently. And then finally, of course, the very important one is with this new distributed employee base, those employees are sitting anywhere, and so the environment they're in is affecting how their laptop performs and how they show up. So we have an agent which sits on the device. It's very passive, it's very low intrusion, it's only monitoring accessibility, it's obviously secure, and it allows you to see from inside their environment, their local router, right through the spectrum of their journey to their ultimate destination, wherever that might be in an application. Without going into the demo platform, because as was said earlier, we have got a demo recording you can look at. What actually Thousand Eyes is doing is correlating multiple views taken from about 2 billion data points a day. So we're gathering 2 billion data points a day from these thousands of agents that are running transactions across all sorts of networks and environments all of the time. And it allows you to look at the overlay and the underlay in one view, a correlated view. And inside that dashboard, you can very quickly isolate when a problem is existing. In fact, you can preempt an issue by setting up alerts across some predetermined rules. But if and when an opportunity arises to use the dashboard because there is a problem that wasn't pre-detected, it allows you to drill down immediately right into a specific node on a network, if that is indeed the problem, and resolve that problem by being able to share the link to the problem with whomever the provider is. I'm going to pause here for a second because I was at a CIO forum, a few weeks back, and in that forum we asked some questions, and one of the questions that we asked was, in terms of their expectation around technology transformation and so on and so forth, and the almost ubiquitous response was that they know technology will fail, they know it will go wrong, they know it will cause problems, and they know that there will be outages. What they are challenged by is whether or not the provider admits that those problems exist and fixes them, and how quickly they fix them. So this mean time to resolution or identification is a really big subject for CIOs and CTOs. Now, I don't often do this, so if any of you are joining from your actual mobile device, but if you have a mobile device to hand and you don't mind doing this, I would recommend you please open www.thousandeyes.com/outages. I didn't want to be too clever and try and exit from this into a live environment and swap out sharing. I thought I'd just show you a screen grab. So this is a screen grab from a few weeks back. And what you can see is this is taking 2 billion data points a day and aggregating them up into a public displayed a map. And that map shows where any inflection points are existing across the global internet. What you can see on the screen is an example of that map. You can see where there are particular outages, and if you want to, you can drill into those, but it gives you a dashboard summary on the left, applications, and on the right, networks. So this is a real example, and in fact, in many network operation centers around the world, large companies have this on a screen, so they're able to see it on a daily basis and understand how that is affecting their business. So in the real world, how does this make a difference? So you can have an outage, but you can have two completely different outcomes. One is a disruption for 2 hours, and the other is a disruption for minutes. So here's an example of a large bank. Excuse me, my voice. And in that 5-hour outage there, you can see how one bank was affected before they were able to resolve the DDoS issue, and how another bank was able to resolve the issue by using Thousand Eyes as a visibility tool. And this brings me to a second story I'd like to share. In our top 10 customers in Europe, about 6 or 7 are banks or financial services companies. The biggest, in fact, our largest customer is a large bank that you will all know. And a couple of years back, when we sat with their COO and asked her about the big challenges that technology and transformation were presenting, bearing in mind those days it was right in the middle of COVID, she explained that she had 3,000 people in Manila that were running at a 65% productivity. These people were processing level 1 and level 2 support dockets. And the challenge with that is it was costing them about $8.5 million a year in lost productivity. That's a lot of money. And she was tasked with improving that, and certainly she was going to be rewarded if she could find that improvement. So you can see, whilst their IT department had explained that this wasn't something that could be easily remedied, we were able to run some synthetic tests from those users' environments, understand what was going on both in their local environment and then on the journeys they were taking. We found a particular congestion issue through a network route that was being used. We were able to modify that specific route, or help them modify that specific route with their vendor. And we saw those productivity shifts from 65% back up to their target of 75% plus. So again, without kind of, being a bit subjective, I think this or these statistics really speak for themselves. As you can see, all of the top 10 US banks users here in Europe, many of the largest banks users, I would say it's about 7 out of the 10 big banks users. Globally, we have many of the top 10 software companies, cloud companies, and as you can see there, about 170 of the Fortune 500. I think for me on this particular slide, the thing that really resonates, or the thing that really, if you take one thing away, and it's only this, is that what Thousand Eyes enables organizations to do, and this is where the digital business assurance, I guess, anchor comes in, is to take what typically can be weeks, certainly hours and days, in order to resolve issues, can be reduced to minutes. I often say 4 to 5 clicks, maximum 15 minutes, and it's very rare that it takes longer than that, but it's that ability to isolate an issue, focus on resolving the issue, that minimizes the impact on brand damage, employee experience damage, and customer experience damage. I have a series of slides here that kind of really focus back on those 3 lenses for financial services. So how does Thousand Eyes help with the customer experience? I mean, there are 3 very interesting stats on the screen, but I think the one for me that's most important here is customer retention. When companies have a strong digital assurance program and a strong digital first capability, nearly 90% of those customers are retained. That's huge and very, very important in this new digital economy. If we look at the retaining and attracting talent, I think similarly, if you look at how few employees are expecting to be back in the workplace full time, it's really important that you can give employees the experience that they are hoping to have in an office wherever they're working from. So being able to equip them with all of the right capabilities to ensure that they're always up, or at least their uptime is maximized, is something where Thousand Eyes is able to help. And that goes right from if they're working in their home environment and using our endpoint agent, we can tell you whether there's congestion in their home environment, whether they're too far away from the router. And now with our recent acquisition of Sam Knows, the ability to be able to see that first mile with the ISP. I think finally, and this is not the final slide, but we're getting close to the end, the opportunity to have this more intellectual operation across your business, which is how do we support future success? How do we drive these initiatives that mean we can be on the front foot of technology? How does it mean that nothing, we're able to embrace technologies, but it's not bleeding, it's rather cutting edge? And I think for me, again, picking out one thing on the slide is the volume of businesses in the financial services environment that expect to use third-party apps in the future, drive cloud or public cloud consumption, and to shift into kind of more edge-related environments. And again, Thousand Eyes is able to help with this. So I think as I come up to the last 2 or 3 slides in the presentation, I wanted to certainly emphasize 2 very important things. One is that Thousand Eyes is agnostic across networks. We're agnostic across software. We're agnostic across infrastructures. We do work with AWS, with Microsoft, with Google, and with Ali in terms of clouds. But we can also work with multiple network providers, different SD-WAN providers, and so on and so forth. As you might imagine, after we were acquired by Cisco, we spent a lot of time and money making sure we were integrated with existing Cisco infrastructures. And therefore, what you're seeing on the screen here is some of our, over the last 1.5 to 2 years, some of our integrations. We have now got a full stack observability solution, which means you can see from the client or from the edge right into the heart of the application, which we call FSO. And this includes Thousand Eyes having a dynamic interface into the AppD dashboard. In terms of hybrid workforce, as you might imagine, whilst we do work extensively with Microsoft Teams and organizations that are using Microsoft Teams, inside of Cisco, we're also plugged in to obviously the WebEx Vantage Points. We run automatic session testing for WebEx sessions, and we're now embedded into the Control Hub. Some of the recent announcements, so initially we were integrated from a network point of view into Cat9 switching, Nexus 9000s, but more recently we've just announced that we will become integrated with the Meraki MX environment. So again, being able to deploy those agents with ease because it's part of the existing infrastructure means that Cisco customers can really enjoy the benefit of Thousand Eyes visibility and digital assurance. I think it's also a very important message to make sure people understand is Thousand Eyes can be used across the phase of technology transformation. So from the discover phase through to the design and build phase, the testing phases, and into production. And what we will do with our professional services and technical account management organizations is help our customers, help our partners to ensure that their customers are able to get the best framework across the workflows that are involved in their technology stack. So whether that's operating inside a NOC or a SOC, or helping specific owners of apps, maybe helping with IT help desk to manage how trouble tickets are showing up from employees, and so on and so forth. Thousand Eyes fits into about 7 or 8 different personas of technology management. So we're really a versatile tool, I guess, is the underlying message. I think as we close, one of my personal views on digital business assurance and choosing an observability tool is that it's no longer a requirement that you can think about as a nice to have. It's now a requirement that you have to have. And in recent times, I've been at events where CXOs are attending, and the discussions at those events involve the CXO, whether that's a CTO, a CIO, a COO, whoever it might be, no longer has the luxury of being able to plead ignorance. I didn't realize that we had so much digital traffic, or whatever that ignorance might be. It's now becoming incumbent for them to own that responsibility and importantly be able to react and act on any and every outage, wherever that might be, and also ensure that those people who are providing those services to them, whether it's a holistic managed service provider or a multiplicity of service providers that have been drawn together by their own IT departments, it's that they own and are able to control all of the variable black holes that now exist in this new world and new digital economy. I hope that's been an opportunity for you to get a brief overview of Thousand Eyes, and in particularly digital business assurance, and how it specifically shows up for the financial services community and industries. And of course, we can do some questions and answers, but importantly also future engagements through our partner Mannai as required. So thank you so much for your time, for listening today, and for being able to attend if you attended, or otherwise just watching the recording.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Really appreciate the presentation. So I guess now we're gonna open up the call for Q&A if anyone has any questions. And also, while we're doing that, there are a couple of questions that I would like to run by you, Anthony, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So yeah, wonderful. So one question that perhaps we're hoping is going to help a lot of our attendees in the audience is related to what role can Thousand Eyes play, if any, in automation of data center operations and monitoring and alerting, etc. Is this something that Thousand Eyes can integrate into or enrich in any ways?
Yes, yes. So depending on what infrastructure and the deployment requirements, what you're trying to enrich and monitor, the answer is yes. So we can integrate into almost all of the permutations of operating systems and compute. It's a lightweight agent that can be deployed. In the worst case scenario, it can be deployed on a NUC, even a Raspberry Pi. I know that sounds terribly primitive, but it may require some information security. So again, depending on where you're located and where the infrastructure is, whether it's entirely owned, third party, there might be an InfoSec questionnaire, but we're typically operating at the highest levels of InfoSec.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Anthony. And another question here is typically, let's say, like one of our customers is interested in using Thousand Eyes in order to have the level of visibility that it can provide for their connectivity. In your experience, how long, on average, or typical time to value, like how long after they get started with the implementation, that they can start seeing value in the environment coming out from implementing Thousand Eyes?
Well, we do have a couple of reports, and they vary anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. So depending on the use case, some are super agile. So I'll give you an exact example. Recently, we were in Dubai. We were with a very large airline. We were sitting in a meeting room. We were discussing a particular opportunity for solution. And one of the people attending that meeting had to leave. That individual left, came back and said that they had a major Microsoft Teams outage problem in the new building they'd been attending. It had been showing up intermittently for the last 3 weeks. And now they had a complete outage where 280 staff, or whatever the number was exactly, were no longer able to attend anything to do with Microsoft Teams. As you can imagine, that was quite an impact. We did have to sidestep their traditional InfoSec requirement in order to deploy the agent. But we deployed an agent there and then on the spot. Okay, it took 1 hour onto a device, and we were able to help them resolve the problem during the course of the rest of that day, and understand why they were having a problem with their devices attending Microsoft Teams environments. And I mean, that's an extreme case, but I've seen us set up tests in minutes and start to see results within days.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, so let me, if you don't mind, I want to move on to the next one. So typically, what type of customer skills are required? So skilling or cross-skilling or whatever is always one of the concerns with any new technology being introduced into a customer environment. Yeah. So are the capabilities or the skills required to be able to efficiently benefit from Thousand Eyes a lot of work, or is it a simple thing? Like, how does it work exactly in your experience as well?
Well, I think anybody who has operated around network operations in the past will find that our user interface is quite intuitive, and setting up those tests with their knowledge would not be too difficult once they understand how to navigate. So what we typically do is a series of onboarding bundles or packages, whatever you want to call them, where we, depending on the level of skill, to your point, I think it's Razwan speaking, or maybe it's Hassan, I don't know, sorry, because you're all muted at the minute. But I think what you'll see is that we're able to probably train someone in a week to be quite efficient. When I say someone, that could be a group of people, so it might be more than one individual. But in that journey, what we're typically doing is helping them set up the specific tests that they're requiring in order to operate the service anyway. So then it becomes more of a maintenance service. But if they want to set up some alternative tests in the future, they'll have those skills. I would say probably a week at the most. But even for high-tech people who've been using these sorts of user interfaces in the past and the intuition of being able to play around with it. Let me put it this way. I would say I'm not very technical, and I was able to set up a test in 2 hours. I made a mistake or two, but within 2 hours, I could work it out. I'm not a network operations operator or specialist.
I'm not either, but I'm sure everyone in the audience who is or who knows about it is really interested. Like the 1 week thing, from our perspective, we are on the data center. It's refreshing to know that we can get our teams up and running on a new technology that can add value to us within 1 week at most. That's definitely an amazing thing.
I do want to say
Yeah.
one thing which is really important is it also really does depend, especially, so anything outside in using our cloud agents is instant. Where we typically find delays is where there is red tape around InfoSec. So where you're going to deploy an agent onto your own environment and infrastructure, opening the right ports and so on and so forth. I think that's sometimes what slows us down. So it's how fast, sometimes it's how fast can the organization move and get approvals if there are approvals required, or to look at our certificates and InfoSec license, coverage that we have, whether that's an ISO or whatever. But I think that's typically where we tend to slow down.
Yeah, I believe lately it is the case for most applications. So InfoSec is becoming more and more important. It's because of the importance, I guess, that it's becoming more critical, and it's taking more time. And hopefully with tools like Thousand Eyes, it can accelerate the process a little bit. All right, my last question for you, Anthony. I know Thousand Eyes covers a number of scenarios, or I don't know if you refer to them as use cases, or digital experience, end user experience, and so on and so forth. So for the financial industry, what would you recommend to a customer who's not using Thousand Eyes already? What are the low-hanging fruits, or what are the best starting points to look at where they're going to see the most value out of it, or it's going to be the easiest entry in order to build up for more value in other domains, if you will?
So I'm not going to try and dodge your question, but I will share with you a real life example. We engaged with a very large bank. It's a bank that everybody would know if I gave the name. And what was interesting for us is when we got into the process of delivery, they took some time to wrestle with 600 plus applications that had become part of the day-to-day operation of their company. Those applications included everything from globally used apps that were kind of consolidated across the piece. But because they were such a federated business, they also had apps that had been built in North Africa that were for specific use cases, but then strangely plugged into other apps, and there were all sorts of interdependencies. So what we typically advise anybody, it's not just banking and financial services, is look at your trouble ticket system, look at where you're typically finding problems. So for argument's sake, let's say at the employee level, there's a history of Microsoft Teams outages or complaints about voice traffic. That might be a place to start with the employee. For argument's sake, let's say you're using a front door to your website, or perhaps a commercial trading app. Similarly, if there are some specific complaints, or you're experiencing specific outage logs that says, this is going down more often, or is not accessible as often as we would like, or the page load times are slower than usual, and that's showing up a lot, I think similarly, that's the right place to start. So I think in general, the low-hanging fruit comes from mitigating problems that are existing or have been existing for some time, or that keep showing up repeatedly. In other words, you find a fix, it's an intermediate fix, and then you end up with another outage. It's just a different version of the problem. I hope that answered your question, Mara, but I'm sorry, I don't mean to sidestep the question, but I think that's probably the generic place I would start if I was owning a business. I mean, as I mentioned, COO, 3,000 people in Manila can't access Jira enough of the time, so they're 65% productive. That's a problem we try and fix. Ongoing outages with Genesis contact center platform for a large insurance company. Those outages keep showing up in different variations. That's a problem we can, help that company fix. So I normally try and encourage, choose 1 or 2 use cases that are really burning on fire, fix those, and then look at how you expand the estate of consumption of Thousand Eyes.
Thank you, Anthony, for the example, for the answer. Honestly, for me, having the level of visibility that Thousand Eyes provides on the entire internet or connectivity map for my applications is more than enough, and being able to pinpoint the specific place, especially now with cloud applications gaining bigger levels of adoption across organizations. So being able to identify which segment, is it the ISP, is it my application, is it my database, is it my network, and so on and so forth, that's enough of a motivator to get started. And that's an amazing starting point in terms of value Thousand Eyes can bring to a lot of customers.
Indeed.
Marwan,
So,
can I just add a
please,
point
Martin.
to the previous question where Tony was elaborating on the outside in, and the when we're deploying agents, we have to go through InfoSec. What we've actually done because of our partnership with Mannai is we've deployed one of these cloud agents actually in Doha, and there is also another agent that is acting like a cloud agent within the Mannai data center. So your customers today have access instantly to outside in visibility from 2 vantage points that sit within Doha. So you can instantly start giving customers that visibility from the outside in as we start to move through, and then we move through the InfoSec, and then we can do inside out as well. So I just wanted to make that point known, that it is available. Your customers could be turning tests on within 15 minutes and testing out from the outside into their mission critical applications.
Yeah, that's a super important point. Thank you, Martin, for highlighting that. We do have the enterprise agent running, and for our customers in the data center, it should be, as you rightly said, it should be much simpler to have that level of visibility. All right, so these are the questions that we're hoping are gonna help shed a little bit more light on how our customers can benefit from Thousand Eyes. We do not have any other questions in the chat, so unless there are any other points that anyone wants to raise, I guess we could conclude. Anthony?
Thank you so much. Genuinely super grateful for the audience, for the opportunity to share and evangelize about Thousand Eyes. Please do not hesitate. If you have anything else that you think about afterwards, after leaving or after listening to this recording, that you'd like support on, we do have a substantial team across Europe supporting Mannai in the region as well. So whatever you need, we're able to bring some examples from over 500 customers in the European region, and I think that would always be helpful in terms of expediting, the experience of working with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony, for the introduction, for the presentation, the discussion. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate your time, and we hope this webinar brings valuable information. We always strive to do so. And see you all in our next webinar. Have an amazing day ahead.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.